contacted her to find out about her. I don't know if she's come in on
Okay, good morning. Page 208 in the Chumashim Parshas Vayeshev. It's the fourth Aliyah. It's the Aliyah, as I say, that is always skipped in elementary school when they're teaching Parshas Shavua. It's the Yehuda v'Tamar story. It's very difficult to teach, certainly to children. But we're adults, right? So we're going to learn Yehuda v'Tamar from the perspective of Rav Soloveitchik. So let's take a look. Let's get our bearings and understand the story itself. Again, page 208, Perek Lamed Ches. It's the fourth Aliyah, Revi. It was at that time that Yehuda was demoted, it seems. Because Vayered Yehuda really means, and he went down from his brothers, which we're going to talk about. Vayered Yehuda, he went down to his brothers and he turned toward an Adulami, and his name was Chira. And he went to see his friend Adulami Shmo Chira. He went to Adulami Shmo Chira. Vayar Sham Yehuda bas Ish Kenani Shmo Shua vayikachel vayavo eleh. And there Yehuda saw the daughter of a prominent merchant whose name was Shua, and he married her. And he had children, as we're going to see. So they had their first child and called him Er. So he has two children, right? He has even a third child. At that point, she no longer has children. So she has three children with Yehuda, right? So they're Er, Onan, and Shelah. Then the Torah tells us, so Yehuda arranges a shidduch for his oldest son, and her name is Tamar. Something that Er did, and he's called the Bechor Yehuda, he's called the oldest of Yehuda, something he did didn't please HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And right, Hashem, and he gets punished, he dies. So now he had no children. Er died before he had children. So now he turns to his other son. Let's do a Levirate marriage because he had no children from Tamar. You should then be through a Levirate marriage. You will continue your brother's seed, right? You'll continue the family. And Onan kilo yeh hazara vaya imba el eshes achiv v'shiches artzah leviltin asan zera achiv. And he did not finish having a relationship with her. He would always, before he would finish having a relationship with her, he would spill his zera. Vayera be'enei Hashem asher asa vayames gam oto. And this also bothered Hashem, and he also dies. Okay, vayomer Yehuda leTamar. And now Yehuda, so two sons have died, and they've been both married to Tamar. So now Yehuda says, you know what, Tamar, go and live with your father, and I'll call you when Shelah is old enough to marry. And he's thinking to himself, the Torah is telling us what's going on in Yehuda's mind. He's already lost two sons to this woman. I don't want to lose my third son, right? She has gained a chazaka of killing my sons, if you will. He's blaming her for some reason. Anyhow, but she doesn't know that's the thinking of Yehuda, and she goes off to her father's house and she waits. Now we're told days pass by, and actually Yehuda becomes an almon. He becomes the widower, right? He loses his wife, Shua, so Yehuda's wife dies. And he now is being consoled, he says, and he went up to oversee his sheep shearers. He and his Adulami friend, Chira, and they go up to Timnata. So while he's going up, he's lost his wife, and now he's going up and taking care of his sheep. It's told to Tamar, by the way, by the way, your father-in-law Yehuda has now gone up with his sheep to Timnah. So now what does Tamar do? She goes and she dresses up like a hairlot. It says clearly she dresses, and she sits in the crossroads of the way to Timnah, and we're told why she does this, because she's sitting in her father's house waiting for Shelah to be old enough. Well, Shelah is old enough, and Yehuda is not moving in any direction to give her Shelah as a husband. Now Yehuda is going up that way, and as he's traveling, he sees this Zona, and he doesn't recognize her, because she has her covered. And he's interested in having a sexual relationship with her. So this is a sexual scandal to a certain degree, right? And he says, come, I will have a rendezvous with you. And Vatomer might, and what you're going to be paid, right? Vatomer matitain li kitavo elai. And so she says, okay, what will you give me? I'm a hairlot, right? She's thinking prostitutes get paid. Okay, so now he answers, so he says, I'll pay you by sheep. I'll pay you, which seems to have been the currency of the time, and it was quite a nice pay. But she says, yeah, until I get the sheep, it's going to take some time. I want a security. And what is the security? And he says, okay, what pledge shall I give you? And she says, I'll tell you what I want. I want your signet, I want your wrap, and I want your staff, all identifiable items, right? And your hand. And he gave them, and he consorted with her, and she conceived actually from that relationship. She leaves, he leaves, right? Then they each go on their own little merry way. And she goes and she takes off her clothes that looked like a hairlot, and now she's back to normal. So now Yehuda has to pay for his rendezvous with her. So he now gives his friend, right, the Adulami, the sheep, go find her and get back my items that I gave her, right? That I gave her as a security. But he couldn't find her. Below mitzvah, he couldn't find her. And he started asking around. Where is this hairlot that was sitting in the crossroads? There was nobody here. We didn't see any hairlot. I don't know what you're talking about. They couldn't find her. So he now returns to Yehuda. I couldn't find her. Only that, I did some research, and anybody says there is no hairlot in this neighborhood. 23. So Yehuda said, lest we become a laughingstock. So he says, in other words, don't continue searching for her, because the more you search for her, the more it's going to become known, and we're going to become ridiculed. I really sent her this kid, but you cannot find her. Okay, I tried, but don't continue searching. So now 3 months pass, and now remember, she became pregnant from that relationship. So now it comes to Yehuda. They tell Yehuda, Zansa Tamar Kalasefa, your daughter-in-law Tamar has had a relationship with somebody, and she shouldn't have, because she is really Yibum. She needs Yibum. So she had a relationship. Zansa, she acted as a hairlot. And moreover, she's conceived, right? She's pregnant. So Yehuda says, well, the punishment is that she should be sent out to be burned. She should burn at the stake. Pasuk 28. And she was being taken, as she was being taken out, because he paskined, right? She's going to die. She sent word to her father-in-law saying, she sent it just quietly, by the man to whom these belong, I have a child. And she said, Hakirno, identify you, please. Who does this signet, this wrap, and this staff belong to? That's the man who made me pregnant. And Yehuda recognizes them. It's his staff, it's his signet, and she is right. It is from me, and as much as I did not give her to Shelah, my son, and he was not intimate with her anymore. Interesting. There's two pshatim to, you can say V'lo Yosaf. They never had a relationship again, or that they got married after this. But most people understand it, that they never had a relationship. Yehuda never had another relationship. Or Vayibe, it came time to give birth. Guess what? She has twins. And as she's giving birth, one child, remember they're twins, so one child puts out his hand, and the birthing, the helper, right, at the birthing place, the midwife grabs a hold of his hand and puts a crimson thread around his hand. But then he pulls it back. And no, the other child comes out. Wow, you pushed the other one aside. So he calls him Paretz, the one who pushes, right? It's asserted yourself. You asserted yourself. And so he's given the first one to give birth was called Paretz. And then the one with the crimson ribbon around his hands finally gives birth by Koshmo Zerach, and he's called Zerach. Zerach, he's called, Rashi says, because Zerach means that which is illuminated, and the crimson. Okay, let's see what Rav Soloveitchik does with this story. So we now all know the story quite well, and we got our bearings. Let's go. The Rav, first of all, looks at this chapter not just as an intriguing story and a sexual scandal, which it seems to be, right? He doesn't look at it only as an intriguing story and that sexual scandal, but rather he sees in the story a view of two amazing people. These amazing people become models of, number one, there's a woman who responds to tragedy, and how she responds to tragedy is what would understand. And the other is how the second person in the story, remember it's Yehuda and Tamar, or should we say Tamar and Yehuda. So Tamar, the Rav wants to look at it and see, here's a woman confronting tragedy. Let's see what we can learn from how she confronts tragedy. Issue one. Let's see how the other person is, I'm letting some people, okay, is Yehuda, and how Yehuda deals with admitting to a terrible error. He has sinned. How does he confront the knowledge that he is wrong and he acted wrong? Remember, he sentences her to death, right? So how does he, and what can we learn from these stories, from these two personalities? That's what the Rav wants to know. So let's go the very beginning. He starts the very opening pasuk, and he looks at this pasuk. And it was at a time that Yehuda went down from his brothers. It's a funny language. What is Vayered Yehuda? He went down. It would seem to suggest that he left one locale where his brothers were, and he went to another, and it must have been in a decline geographically. But that doesn't make sense, because there is no mention of a geographic movement in this story. So what does Vayered Yehuda mean? And Rashi quotes this pasuk, and Rashi quotes the Medrash, and he says, where did he descend from? It does not mean geographic at all, but rather Vayered Yehuda means he descended in the sense he was demoted in their eyes. He lost their respect. In other words, Vayered Yehuda is the word that's telling you that there's now tremendous tension between Yehuda and the brothers. Furthermore, why is the story of Tamar and Yehuda, which bothers the Rav and all Mefarshim, appear here? It has nothing to do with the Yosef story, or so it would seem to be, and it's inserted in right. That's bad writing. You're finish your story, and you want to start another story. But the Bible is not the Tanakh. The Torah is not poor literature. It's the best literature. It's written by Hashem. So why would you interrupt the story of Yosef's sale with a totally different story, which seems on the surface to have nothing to do with it? What is the connection between these two stories? And that will teach us something as well. So the Torah would never have inserted this unless there is some connection between right, the sale of Yosef and Yehuda and Tamar. So Rashi, quoting the Midrashim, says Vayered Yehuda has nothing to do with a geographic location, but rather it contains the answer of why this story is inserted here, and he interprets the following. It means that Yehuda was demoted in the eyes of his brothers. He lost respect because they blamed him. What did they blame Yehuda for? Yehuda was the one who gave the idea to sell Yosef. When they accepted the idea, they thought, oh, it's a good idea. Now, post-sale, what did they realize? What was the story right before this? How Yaakov was a broken man. Where is my son? Oh, he's been eaten by the wolves, right? By the bears, by the animals. They see that their father is broken, and instead of taking it upon themselves a bit of responsibility, and they should the idea, they didn't have to accept it. They could have fought back. They could have pushed back. And they could have said, Yehuda is a bad idea. But they accepted it. And now they don't want to take any responsibility. So who would they put it all upon? Vayered Yehuda. They dump it on Yehuda. And Yehuda is demoted. He's demoted to a point where, and I quote the Rav, he was on the verge of being banished from the tribes of Israel and his name erased from the breastplate. Those are heavy words. The Rav is describing, in other words, they were really ready to blame him totally, take no blame on their own, which is going to change later, and they're blaming Yehuda. Vayered Yehuda is telling us he's not in a good position with his brothers. Okay? And that will explain why this story comes at this juncture. Now, you should know there's a whole debate among the Rishonim when this Tamar and Yehuda story really took place. Did it take place at this juncture when is being sold? Yosef is now going down to Egypt and it's going to be taken, as we're going to find out after the Yehuda and Tamar story. He's sold and he's purchased by Potiphar, right? Et cetera, and he then gets thrown in prison. The whole story as it unfolds. Very exciting story, but that took place totally, according to many Mefarshim, having nothing to do historically with Yehuda and Tamar. Yehuda and Tamar did not take place at this time. And so there's a whole debate, but I'm not going to get into that. That's more of a chronological issue for the Parsha. But he's saying that they, at this juncture, right before the Yehuda and Tamar, they've blamed Yehuda for the sale of Yosef, correct? Okay. Continue on. The Rav then says, what's the next pasuk that we should look at? Let's take a look at pasuk Yud Beis, right there on page 208. Vayirbu hayamim, and the boys, because if you remember what happens, that Yehuda gets married. Yehuda has 3 boys, right? She gets married to Shua, and Shua has three, right? That's her name, Ishknai Shua. He gets married to a woman, Shua, and they have 3 children, Onan, and Shelah. Dies, Onan dies, and Onan, after died, was married to Tamar. After died suddenly for doing something wrong, we're not told what. The Torah doesn't tell us what did wrong. So Onan is given Tamar as a levirate marriage, and we're told Onan does something terribly wrong, and he doesn't allow her to get pregnant. That's what happens, right? According to the Midrashim, Tamar was a gorgeous woman, and he didn't want her to in any way be diminished in her beauty by a pregnancy, which pregnancy can do. So no, that he would not allow her to become pregnant. And he dies. So now there's a third son, right? And Shelah should have become Tamar's wife again, Tamar's husband for the third time, third child. And Yehuda says at that juncture, Shelah's too young. Why don't you go back to your mate, and I'll let you know when Shelah is old enough, right? So now take a look at Pasuk Yud Beis. Vayirbu hayamim batamat bat Shua eshet Yehuda, and many days have passed, and Shua dies. Bat Shua, right? And she dies, right? Exactly. And she dies, and what happens to Bat Ish Kanani Ushmo Shua? Yes. So Bat Shua dies, and this is so Yehuda becomes an almon, becomes a widower. Yehuda. Now he goes and he comforts himself by being distracted, right? Because he's lost his wife. What's this by Yerbu Hayamim? And many days pass. And these two words, Rav Soloveitchik says, capture Tamar's true personality. You want to understand, remember, the Rav, as I said at the very beginning, the Rav sees this Yehuda and Tamar story much more than just a sexual scandal and a intriguing story in the Torah. He sees it as the demonstration of the Torah is giving us two models of people. On the one hand, Tamar, who deals with tragedy, on the other hand, with Yehuda, who deals with admitting to a mistake. And here we're dealing with, he says, these two words, Vayirbu hayamim, and many days have passed. Where is she? Where's Tamar at this time? Back in her father's house, waiting quietly. And here the Rav would say, Vayirbu hayamim teaches us Tamar is a heroic woman. She's lonely, forlorn, forsaken, right? But do you hear anything from her? She never complains. She's silent. She's patient. She waits, heroically waits. All her friends were getting married or married. They're all rearing their own families. And what's she doing? She's waiting quietly, and she's being treated with ridicule and contempt. Certainly psychologically, she's going through that with a ridicule and a contempt. Shelah married, but Yehuda forgot all about her. Shelah's old enough. Shelah's ready. She should have married him. No, but Shelah's sent to somebody else, right? All this time she waited without saying a word of contempt. Vayirbu Hayamim tells us Tamar is a heroic personality. And the Rav says that represents, if you will, the model for Knesset Yisrael, for Klal Yisrael, Bnei Yisrael. We wait for the reunion with Hashem without saying a word. I quote the Rav. Was she not the incarnation of Knesset Yisrael, with for her beloved hundreds and thousands of years under the most trying circumstances? She's the model for us. Presents Knesset Yisrael. We're waiting. We're in Golos all this time. We're waiting, and we're quiet, and we don't complain. Did not Tamar personify the greatest of all heroic actions? To wait while waiting arouses laughter and derision. That's heroic, keeping quiet and not rebelling, right? The Rav also knows, if the Jewish people had not had a Tamar and hundreds and thousands like her, who sat until Shelah grows up, we would not have been able to face all the challenges history has thrown our way. In other words, it's the Eshes Chayil that Tamar becomes, right? It's the paradigm of the heroic woman who's able to absorb all of the ridicule and doesn't say a word. She just knows that her role is an important role, and she's willing to accept it no matter what comes her way. That's how the Rav understands the story from Tamar. Tamar becomes that woman who's willing quietly to accept her fate, and she waits for the moment that she can turn it around. And we're going to see, she doesn't sit on her hands, but she doesn't complain. That's the heroic act. What does she do? She demonstrates a determination. What's her determination? That she's going to have a child from this Jewish family, right? From Yehuda. Yehuda is going to give her a child. If it's not going to be through his sons, it's going to be through him. But I am going to be married to this Jewish family. She sees that her connection has to be with this family, but she keeps quiet. She acts, but keeps quiet. That's a heroic woman. Tamar becomes the model of the heroic woman. I would say the model of what we call the Yeshes Chayil in many, many ways. Take a look at Pasuk Tesvav. And the Rav is building this theory via these psukim. Take a look. So now, by Yireha Yehuda vayachshaveh lezona. When Yehuda saw her, he thought she was a harlot. While the Torah is describing Tamar's enormous determination to bear a child from the Jewish people, she demeans herself in order to do it. She's not a zona. She's a respected woman, but yet she's willing to make herself into a zona in order to lure Yehuda to create this child with him. Right? She conceived twins from this union. One of them, Peretz. Peretz becomes the progenitor of David HaMelech, who becomes the progenitor of Moshiach himself. How can this be? The Moshiach is coming from a relationship of a father-in-law and a daughter-in-law, a zona. It all happened because the Moshiach must come from tremendous heroism, reflected by determination and loyalty. And those are the two elements that Tamar has. Determination, right? Okay, she goes to her father, she waits, she sees it's not happening. What does she do? She takes action, right? And she takes action that's going to demean her, but she takes action. Why? Because she demonstrates determination and she demonstrates loyalty. And those are the two elements of true heroism. And that's why the Mashiach must come from determination and loyalty. And that's why she's become the progenitor of the Mashiach, the progenitor of David, and eventually of the Mashiach himself. Now take a look, continues on the Rav, and he takes us to the next personality. So we get the picture of Tamar, right? Tamar is painted in strokes, right? The Rav is painting these strokes. He says the Torah is giving us a vision of who Tamar is. Remember, there are two personalities in the story. The Tamar is the heroic personality, and now we're going to look at the second personality, who's whom? Yehuda. Now let's take a look at the Yehuda story. Pasuk Chavav. So she's caught now pregnant, and so they inform Yehuda, who seems to be a personality from the Torah, doesn't tell you, but he seems to be a judge of some kind, right? He's a judge. He's Yehuda. He's a judge, and he's paskening a halacha on her. And they say, by the way, your daughter-in-law, who was supposed to be herself in her father's house, she's pregnant. That means she had an inappropriate relationship, and she can't be pregnant because she is not allowed to get married except through Yibum, right? And she's not getting Yibum. That means she's violated her status and she deserves to be killed, right? She's violating herself. Well, so then what happens? What does Tamar do? Again, Tamar demonstrates heroism. And the Gemara learns an unbelievable statement. The Gemara learns from Tamar. It says, Tamar taught us, don't mibalbin chavero. Don't shame your friend. It is better, rather than shaming your friend, to be thrown into a kivshana esh, and into a fire and die. And where do they learn it from? They learn it from here. And now that's a moral lesson. That's not a halachic lesson. You don't go and die for this. This is not one the Yehera Yavors, right? But she demonstrated an enormous heroism. Okay, that's true about her. But now he confronts the fact that she says hakerna, right? Take a look at Pasuk Chafei. Vatomer hakerna lemi hachosemes ba'ptilim v'hamateh ha'ela. Hakerna, does those words mean anything to you? Who said hakerna? We saw it already. It's the biblical echo. Of course, when they gave him the Ktones Pasim, the coat that he gave Yosef, with all the blood over it, They said Hakirna, the same words. It's a biblical, right? It's the biblical echo. And who caused that Hakirna? Yehuda. Yehuda, right? Midah keneged midah, measure for measure. You did a Hakirna to your father, now you're getting a Hakirna. She says, brilliant. She says, she doesn't say a word. She could have immediately embarrassed him. He's a judge. He seems clearly from the story, between the lines, you get it, that he's a man very respected, right? Clearly, you would paint the picture of Yehuda right now being very respected, and she could have knocked him off his high horse, right? And she doesn't. She says quietly, she sends it to him. She sends it to her father-in-law Yehuda. And she doesn't say anything more. Whoever this belongs to, the man. I know the man, you know the man, but nobody else knows the man. And unless I'm going to speak out, nobody's going to know, right? We realize that at that moment, this is a totally transformative moment for Yehuda, isn't it? Because she's saying, I could go to my death, but I'm not going. You're going to Hakirna. And if you do, fine, I'm saved. If not, I die. It's an enormous picture of her heroism, no question about it. So then she's Vatomer Hakirna lemiha chosemes vapsin v'amateila vayaker Yehuda. Yehuda recognizes vayaker Yehuda. Stop at that moment. You freeze that moment in the literature, in the text itself. You can imagine it. You have a visual. And he goes, oh my God, they're mine. I made my own daughter-in-law. Do you realize at that moment what Yehuda is confronting? It's an unbelievable moment in Tanakh, right? Vayaker Yehuda, freeze it, and realize what's going on in his head. I'm the one responsible. She's not wrong. I'm wrong, right? Vayaker Yehuda vayomer. 2 words. Sodka mimeni. She's more righteous than Sodka mimeni. In other words, he's confronting in those 2 words a transformation of his own personality. Right? He's so far. What do we know of Yehuda up until this time? Right now, what do we know of Yehuda? Yehuda is clearly a persuasive personality, right? We know that because he convinced his business. He was the spokesman. We know that. Okay, just what we were told. We could paint a picture of Yehuda, dramatic, very persuasive personality. So he's his position as a judge of some kind in this community. He has sentenced her to death, and now he has to confront his own error.
What is the, is that he did?
He made her pregnant.
What was the reason?
No, at this juncture, the only thing he had done.
His son to the son.
Yeah, 100%. He should have given. He lied. He lied. He missed. That's correct. He misguided her.
Because otherwise she.
Yes, he made her into a parasite. Yeah, 100%. 100%. You're 100%. He's done 2 things wrong. He's done 2 terrible things. He's destroyed her life, and he really almost killed her. And that's number 2. Well, in order, he destroyed her life by sending her off and having no intention of giving her the 3rd son. Number 2, he has a rendezvous with her, a sexual rendezvous, which was amoral, right? And number 3, he's willing to almost kill her without knowing the facts, not knowing the real facts, right? Okay. But here, these 2 words, Sod Kamimeni, is transformative Yehuda. It's now that Yehuda is becoming Yehuda. It's at this moment. Sod Kamimeni makes Yehuda the Yehuda who becomes the father of Melech, David HaMelech, the father of Melech HaMashiach. Why? Right now, he shook off the negative image he had earned because of the sale of Yosef. He literally literally in those two words, shakes off that negative image, and he demonstrates a true commitment to truth, right? Sod Kamimeni as a commitment to truth, no matter what the cost is going to be demanded of him. It's going to be a very heavy cost that it's going to be demanded of him, right? Truth is truth is truth. Sod Kamimeni are two words that transform Yehuda into Yehuda, right? The Medrash in the Mechilta states that because Yehuda admitted his guilt here, he was destined to have the kings of Israel descend from him. That's what the Mechilta says. Because he had admitted to Tamar Tzad Kamimeni, he's destined to have the kings of Israel descend from him. But what does admitting to Tamar have to do with kings of Israel? That you have to ask. And we understand. We should appreciate the great personal fortitude that this admission demonstrates. Tamar could have been sent to her death, and no one, in capital no, in capital one, no one would have ever found out the truth. It would have gone with her to death. Nobody would ever know. Without a doubt, offering admission on Yehuda's part was enormously difficult and heroic act on its own right, right? You have two heroes here. You have two heroic personalities. She confronting and being heroic and being silent in the face of tragedy, right? And not complaining at all. He being a hero in how to confront admitting a tremendous mistake. He clearly had to grapple with the fact that by admitting his error, and it was a big error, numerous errors, as we point out, he was opening himself to tremendous public ridicule, right? And a loss of respect and a loss of influence. He could have lost it all by doing this, right? This moment becomes the paradigm, Rabbi Soloveitchik says, of tshuva. You do tshuva no matter what the cost is, because the truth is you admit to your error. And it's a hard one. The Rav notes that the connecting point between, we asked this before, now the Rav points it out, between the story of Yosef's sale and Yehuda and Tamar is the fact that the story of Yosef's sale teaches us the importance of tshuva, because the brothers had made a mistake, a terrible mistake, mistreated their brother, and they have to do. And Yehuda and Tamar, Yehuda has to do tshuva, right? So the connection of these two stories, it's not like you inserted a story within a story and they have nothing to do with each other. They do, with the most important line of connection is the theme of tshuva. You're seeing both. The brothers will admit to their mistake. Take a look at 42 mem base, 42 20 chof aleph. Mem base chof aleph is in Miketz. It's in next week's parsha. Mem base chof aleph is on page 236. You have it, 236. Vayamru isha lachiv, aval ashemim anachnu. Those words should be very familiar with us, because those we use in the vidui on Yom Kippur. Aval ashemim anachnu. Use those words. But we are guilty. Aval ashemim. Where are they saying this? This is when they are caught with the right no. This is before the goblet. Isn't this with the money? The money being returned to their sacks, right? I think so. I don't think this is the yet.
No,
yes.
To the beginning.
Yes. No, this is the money in the sacks. And then they open it up. By the way, this puzzle tells us something that the earlier psukim did not tell us. The earlier psukim seemed we didn't hear any cry from the pit by Yosef. Mm-hmm. The text doesn't tell us any cry, but this pasuk says that he did cry out and we didn't listen. Right? So they're ashemim. So they admit they do tshuva there. They do tshuva. At the beginning of this story, they dumped on whom? Yehuda. Now, finally, later, they're going to Aval Hashemim Anachnu, one to the other, said, we're all guilty. And it's Yehuda, by the way, Yehuda is going to do tshuva not only here with the story of Tzadka Mimeni of Tamar, but he's going to do tshuva with the sale of Yosef. Where? When did he do tshuva? By offering to be the replacement of Binyamin. Correct. He's willing to be the replacement slave instead of Binyamin. And that's clearly an act of tshuva because Binyamin is whose son? Rachel. And whose brother? Full brother, only one man, full brother, Yosef. And Yosef, I didn't do it, but now I'm going to do it, right? And that's Yehuda. And Yehuda becomes the Baal Tshuva par excellence in this whole story. But the brothers do as well, because that's the connection. You see the Tshuva line, the Tshuva story. It's Yehuda's descendant, David HaMelech, who also becomes a Baal Tshuva. When the Navi tells him, you acted inappropriately, Nasan HaNavi rebukes him for Bathsheba. And he admits, right? He admits to his mistake. So you see, everybody in this story and everybody to come later on from this story are all Ba'alei Tshuva. It's Yehuda, not Yosef, who's destined to give birth to the Mashiach. So you're scratching your head saying, not Yosef? Maybe it should have been Mashiach ben Yosef, not Mashiach ben David. But it's not Mashiach ben Yosef, it's Mashiach ben David. And the Rav wants to tackle that problem as well in this story, because this is all surfaced within the story of Yehuda and Tamar. You can see it's much more than just an intriguing sexual rendezvous, right? A scandal, it is, but there's so much more to this. So you have to ask, why do you think it's not Yosef that is the Mashiach, the ancestor of Melech HaMashiach, and it's David, right? It's Yehuda. So the Rav answers because Yosef and Yehuda are totally different personalities. Yosef is, what do we call him? A tzaddik. A tzaddik means you have that, I call it the righteous gene, the religious gene. You see some kids from their little, from the moment they're born, they have a religious gene. You know, they just they're from. You see it. That's Yosef. Yosef was a tzaddik from the moment he was born. He was attracted to that. Yehuda wasn't. Yehuda is whom? He's not the tzaddik, he's the Baal Tshuva. The Baal Tshuva is the Melech HaMashiach. That is to be a tzaddik is not heroic. To be a Baal Tshuva is heroic. Why do I say that? Because a tzaddik, that's your personality. That's the DNA that you have. But the Baal Tshuva, what do you have to do? You have to overcome your DNA, right? Your personality is not naturally that way. So you overcome your personality. That's Yehuda. And that's Melech HaMashiach. The Mashiach, first and foremost, the Rav notes, must be a heroic personality. That's the Melech HaMashiach. Indeed, the very name Yehuda has a connotation of admission of Hoda'ah. Hoda'ah means I admit. Not only I praise, but I admit, right? I admit there are greater people than me. That's what Hoda'ah is. They're greater powers than I am. Indeed, the Melech Mashiach comes not from Yosef, but from Yehuda. And that's also within this story that we're seeing. Continue on. Vayikra Shemo Peretz. Let's go pasuk Chavtes in the very end. So the two boys are born. Peretz is the one who goes out, right? First, right? The second. The first one is Zerach. Zerach puts his hand out, but retracts it. He might have been very well retracted by Peretz. Whatever it happens, he goes out and he comes back in. So Zerach is not the firstborn. Peretz is the firstborn. So it says in Pasuk Chavtes, "Vayikim eshiv yado v'nei yatsa achiv." Tamer ma paratzto Peretz. Way you jumped, right? You're pushy. You're right. You're determined. Vayikra Shmo Peretz, and he's called Peretz. Who's Peretz? The trajectory of Jewish history changes right now. Although the entire story of Yosef and his brothers and all of Yosef's machinations are done for one purpose, What's the purpose? Everything he does in the story of Yosef and the sale, it's to bring Yaakov to Mitzrayim and to bring his entire family to Mitzrayim and to show obeisance to Yosef. They're going to bow to Yosef. That's why he's doing all of this. It's to make his dreams come true. That's what he wants. God changes everything right now. Vayikra Shemo Peretz. He takes the kingship away from Yosef. By the way, does Yosef's dream ever totally come to fruition?
His mother doesn't bow.
No, not only his mother doesn't bow, nobody's bowing down. I mean, the sons bow down to him, but that's right. His mother doesn't bow down to him, and it changes totally, right? He takes care of them, but there's no rulership over them. He takes the kingship away from Yosef and he bestows it on Peretz, on Yehuda. That's what happens here. Yehuda, Peretz, all the way to David HaMelech, and then David HaMelech to Melech Mashiach. Okay, so some closing remarks of this whole story of Yehuda and Tamar. One of the most intriguing stories, right? So we had a lot of questions when we started. We started, first of all, why in the world is there the interruption of this story, which is the only interruption for 4 parshiot? There are 4 parshiot dedicated to the sale of Yosef. Vayeshev, Miketz, Vayigash, Vayechi. Correct? The whole Yosef story, there are 3 that deal with the sale. Vayeshev, this is the week's parsha, next week's parsha, Miketz, and Vayigash, okay. But Vayechi is a continuation and the summation of the whole story of Yosef. And by the way, if you think about it, in Tanakh, outside of Moshe Rabbeinu, who is the most important figure and written about him more than anyone else, who's the second most focused on personality in Tanakh? It's Yosef. Yosef has more psukim and more in Chumash than any other, not Avraham, not Yitzchak, not Yaakov. More than Yaakov. Yaakov does have quite a bit, right? But it's Yosef, right? And in the whole story of the 4 parshios of the Yosef story, there's only one interruption of 30 psukim. And it's the Tamar Yehuda story. And we had to wonder, why? Why is this? So we saw, really the connection is the whole concept of tshuva. And we saw that these stories actually mirror each other, right? Some want to suggest, by the way, that the Yehuda Tamar and the Yosef story have a lot of comparisons, more than what I just told you. Let's think about them for 2 seconds. We have a seduction of Yehuda by Tamar, right? Mm-hmm. We have a seduction of Yosef by Eshes Potiphar, right? In the Yosef story, he demonstrates tremendous fortitude, right? For Yosef is the true tzaddik, while Yehuda falls for the seduction, right? You see that. One story, Yehuda has a relationship. Yosef does not have it. Yosef pulls back. Yosef, she must have been a gorgeous woman, the wife of Potiphar. She must have been really enticing him. And it must have been very, very difficult, but he doesn't fall for it because Yosef is, that's right. And Yehuda falls for the mistake, but he confronts it. He becomes the Baal Tshuva, right? What we are being taught is that to be Melech Yisrael, right? It's more than just being pious. That's not the only goal. Rather, it's determination to act heroically and to admit when you are wrong, right? Again, I say, being king of Israel is the personality is not just piety. Rather, it's a determination to act heroically and to admit when you're wrong. That's what leadership, that's what really leadership requires, I must say. That's not what we're seeing these days in a modern world that we live in. People don't admit to doing any wrong because they're always right and everybody else is wrong, right? Okay. Yosef is needed to be the leader that brings Mitzrayim to create the formation of, right? Yosef is there doing that, but it's Yehuda who's needed formation of the people and develop it into a future. No wonder that all in all, Vayeshev about 2 personalities. Who are they? Yosef and Yehuda, right? So you have 2 personalities that occupy Parshas Vayeshev. if I would boil it down to it, I'd say, okay, who are the two personalities that surface in this story? It's only two. It's Yosef and Yehuda. Everybody else's background music. It's Yosef, Yehuda, and they will continue to be a Yosef Yehuda story through Miketz, right at the end of Miketz, and then Vayigash Elav Yehuda Vayomer, right? It's the confrontation of Tzidkis versus the Baal Tshuva. And what does the Gemara say? Where the Baal Tshuva stands, even the Tzaddik Gomer is not able to stand, right? That's what the Gemara says in Yuma, right? Where the Baal Tshuva stands, even the Tzaddik cannot stand. What's Pshat? Now we can understand. Who's the Tzaddik? It's Yosef. But when you compare it to the Baal Tshuva is a more heroic and determined personality. It's more of a leadership personality. Correct? And that's why Melech Yehuda Yehuda becomes Melech, David HaMelech, and David HaMelech becomes the Mashiach. All through the story. So it's one story that the Rav paints in a tapestry, demonstrating it's so much more than just, like I say a few times already, it's just more than just an intriguing, interesting story. It's here to teach us these lessons. We get the personality of Tamar, who represents much more of a Yosef personality. Correct?
Right.
She does. She's the heroic Eshes Chayil. That's true. Which is true, by the way, period, in Jewish life. It tends to be, the woman is much more pious than the men. They tend to be, historically, 100%. We see that in the world around us. And yet, we also have the story of how Yehuda is willing to confront admitting to his big mistake. And when you can do that, wow, you can be a leader. Okay.
When you said that the Tamar Yehuda story was not necessarily took place here, where does that come
Right.
from?
Well, they have a lot. Either before, or there are those that say before and those that say after, but it's not here. It's placed here for a literary purpose, but it's not here chronologically. It can't be, most probably. If you start crunching, the numbers, if you will, of the dates, it's just impossible to have occurred right there.
Also, wouldn't he have gone to Yaakov and admitted that it
Interesting. Yeah. Does
happened? Because it
Yaakov,
actually got forced
that's
by
a question, by the way, for
Yosef.
Vayeshev. Does Yaakov ever really know
What
that
happened?
the brothers sold Yosef?
Did they
Does
ever
Yaakov-
admit that? Right?
Exactly.
'Cause that's
To
the-
Yaakov.
to Yaakov.
Does Yaakov ever learn? Does Yaakov go to his kever knowing what happened to Yosef or not? And Nechama Leibovich has an article on this, and I think, if I remember, I saw it many years ago, but I think she argues, no, he does not know. He does not know. They kept it from him. And who would you credit there for that?
Yosef.
Yosef, 100%. Yosef doesn't want brothers to tell. So what Abba doesn't know, it's okay.
He's a
Right?
peacekeeper.
Yes, he is. He's a tremendous Ishama. Okay, next week and the following week, I am out of town, so we won't have, it just happens Wednesdays,
Right.
those 2 Wednesdays. So that takes us Vayigash, Miketz and Vayigash. There will be no Shiur. I think Vayechi, I do have a Shiur. Okay, I love Vayechi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thanks.
Everybody should have a lovely, lovely day.
Amen. You too.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
yes, a Chanukah Sameach.
Right.
Yes,
Happy Hanukkah.
amen for all of us.
Yes.
But it says that Vayomer Yehuda. What did he say to? Was it a court? It said Vayomer Yehuda. It said Kamineni. Who was he talking to?
To her,
He was talking to her?
it seems to be Tzadka. Mimeni, she's the more. I'll tell you a quick shaila. I'll tell you a quick shaila. It's fantastic that Rabbi Ramon shared with me. And he was asked this early on in the war, because remember, 2023 Hanukkah was really pretty early on in the war with Gaza, Hamas. And he was asked this by Yeshiva Bacher, which also happens. Says it's a typical chap of the Yeshiva Bacher. It was Hanukkah was coming, and they were being, they came to realization, the Israeli army learned along the way how to handle guerrilla warfare, and they mastered it. If you think the projections war, we were going to lose tens of thousands of boys. Projections war, we lost enormous amount.
They're not.
But not tens of thousands, not thousands. We lost hundreds, and we lost way too many. But they really mastered, all of the military people are now demonstrating they really, really mastered it. They really mastered it. It's quite impressive what they did. Anyhow, one of the things we were being blamed by the International Court of Opinion was we were demoing all of Gaza. We were destroying all of Gaza. But they had to destroy Gaza. Why? Because they learned the hard way that whenever you left a building standing and you cleared it out, 5 minutes later, what happened? Terrorists re-entered it. So you could have cleared it out and then left, and then they penetrate again because it was guerrilla warfare, and they come back and shoot at you. But they were being blamed because we were destroying the buildings. So this is what they came up. There was a building overlooking a big section in northern Gaza, and they said they want to put a menorah on the top of the building and light it, so all of the chayalim and everybody can see it from far. But they realized, of course, if they light it, it becomes a target for the terrorists to shoot at. They'll think it the Jews are. So they said, we're going to light it before dusk, right? We're going to light, so nobody's going to see it. Then they will see it after night falls, but we're not going to be in the building. So what are they going to do? They're going to destroy the building, thinking that we're in there. So we won't be blamed for destroying the building. Let them do the dirty work. Let them, this building has to go. And this is the way we're going to destroy it. He says, good, yeshiva chab. They'll destroy it, but we won't be there. So what was the shaila? Can we make a bracha on Ner Chanukah, knowing that it's going to be destroyed? Number one, we're going to be doing it a little early, right? From Plag HaMincha. Can we make the bracha? It's also Rabbi, it's not Ishuvei. So the whole question. So I believe Rabbi Rimon, I didn't get a chance to hear the psak, but I'm almost positive, knowing Rabbi Rimon, that every psak that he gave, if he was going to strengthen, he asked them. He did tell, he said, why do you need to make a bracha? He says, not to make a bracha. It doesn't give us the geschmack of doing a mitzvah. We need everything in this war that would increase the spirit of the chayalim he permitted. So, but it's an interesting child, isn't it? The chap. They'll destroy it. Blamed. Okay. They should continue to be having its love. Yes. But nisim v'niflos are happening. And we got to realize nisim v'niflos.
Right.
Ever since October 7th, nisim v'niflos. October 7th was a churban of a churban of a churban. Where we stand today, we watched Israel achieve with Yad Hashem nisim v'niflos. And we got to admit it. Model Hashem, Hodu Hashem Kitov. We paid, yes, we paid dearly for it, but nisim v'niflos. Syria's gone. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And mamish nisim. Okay, we should have. What do we say? She'asa nisim lavosenu bayomim mo'im asman hazeh. Okay. All to everybody. Should have a lovely, lovely day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Be well. Thank